What do innovation professionals actually do? And how do they do it? How do designers create new products, services, strategies and systems? And how do they overcome barriers to make change happen? Welcome to Idea Work, the podcast about the people, skills and mindsets behind innovation. I'm Michael Walter, and I'm glad you've joined me. Whether you're starting out in innovation, shifting careers, or just curious, you're in the right place. Let's discover what makes ideas work. Hello, welcome everyone. So today we're going to explore all the things you need to do before starting a design thinking project. Now, this episode also relates to really any sort of project, and we'll look at the things that you do to prepare for a client meeting. How do you set up your team? How do you have the client meeting? What sort of things you're looking at? And how do you prepare your reverse brief to explain to the client what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and get their feedback? To guide our understanding, we're going to work through a hypothetical project together to demonstrate the different stages of the design thinking process and what sort of things you might consider, especially when working on this problem space. So the hypothetical scenario is that you're a design company and you've got a small team, there's 5 of you, and you've been approached by a university who wants help to better support their international students at the university to access the medical support and health services that the university provides, because they noticed that they haven't been utilising them. Now, just to note, this is completely hypothetical, this is completely made up, but it's just helpful to have a bit of a case study to really understand a process. I think sometimes we learn these processes in an abstract sort of way. You know, you see the image of the double diamond and it's hard to grapple with unless you have an idea of how it would work with real people. Throughout, when I'm talking about the different frameworks and different stages of the journey, I'll also share stories about my experience of it and bring in real examples. But the case study will be there just to guide the overarching process. So the team is so important, the team that you're working with, and having clear communication with your team is crucial. Whenever I lecture and I have students doing group projects, I just explain to them that you need to have time at the start to get to know each other, to work out your communication styles, to work out who's going to do what, and just to set up expectations. If you do this front load at the beginning, you can remove lots of challenges that might occur because you've set this communication standard up. So some of the things you might discuss is how you work together. Will you meet weekly? Will you have a set meeting time? And is there an agenda that you focus on? Do you do asynchronous updates? And is there rules around when you can do that? Like early on in my business, my sister and I had to make a decision that we'd only communicate about the business during work hours, 9 to 5. Because otherwise it can get really tricky. If you're getting ready to go to sleep and you get a message at 9 p.m. about the business. And I mean, this is good practice for any sort of business. You might also want to think about where you might get external support. So as a group, do you need other advice? Do you have other people you can call on for advice on technology or facilitation if you need it? And talking about roles and responsibilities and what you'll do. So this might be a flat hierarchy, or you might have someone who is the leader, who might have more experience and guides the project. They might be the ones who are continually communicating with the client. So they lead the client meetings and others might take notes. This is important to get clear. Also noting that there is ambiguity in design thinking processes, and some people might take leads for different parts of the process. You want to discuss the platforms and tools you'll be using. So whether it's Miro or Mural for collaboration online, this is like an interactive whiteboard that you can use, and it's a great way to store your findings, your post-it notes, clippings from articles. Are you going to use Slack, Teams or Google Meets or something for your communications, or WhatsApp even? And then do you have a preference for project management? Whether it's something like Trello or Asana or Notion, just getting clear together on how you'll work together as a team is super important. And having this sort of session beforehand can be really helpful and can just get rid of a whole lot of problems early on. The next stage is to prepare yourself and the team. So you really want to go into the meeting with the client with a solid understanding, as much as you can, about the organization and about the problem space. This will mean that the questions you ask are not just surface level. You come in, you understand both the organization. This means that you've done perhaps a LinkedIn search of the different people in the meeting to understand what their role is in the organization. You've researched the problem space. So in our case, you've done a bit of background reading already about the international student experience at this university. It could also be more broadly in Australia. And if you can, you might have found some specific information about, international students' access to medical support and healthcare support while they're doing their studies, what health insurance they might have and how they go about accessing that. It's really preliminary research to prepare you so you can go into this meeting and you can ask great questions. You want to also go in prepared with some questions that you can ask. And it's good for the client to know that you're going to come in and ask questions. This isn't just a chance to meet and greet and tell them what you'll do. You're actually going to go in and interview them about the problem space. You're going to ask them about the business context, what they've noticed about the problem space, why is this a problem that they need to solve now, and what have they already tried to do. You're going to ask about stakeholders, who are the people that are important to get a perspective on. Because when you go into the research stage, it'll be great for you to interview international students at that university, but it might also be helpful to interview other stakeholders. So you want to, before going to this meeting, have prepared and done a bit of a stakeholder map of the different people you think might be relevant to talk to. You want to really get a clear understand the purpose of the project and what are some of the expected deliverables. Do they have an idea of something they want? So just check in that they don't have expectations, because you might need to manage expectations. They might want you to develop a website, but it might not be the best solution. So if you can go in understanding that and have that conversation early, you can manage problems later on. But equally, there might be something that they want done, and so just managing the scope of the project. Is it clear? Is it like a known project problem that they want to solve, or is it something that's more exploration and they've got a clear problem that they want to come up with ideas for, and you're going to suggest ideas and then come up with a solution? In other cases, I was recently on a project where we were doing research to prepare for a website. So it was very clear what the outcome was going to be, but our research was broad and open to get a really understanding of how that website will be designed in such a way that it'll be useful to the user. So it's helpful to just get a sense of what the deliverables, expected deliverables will be. Or do they just want you to create something, create a prototype, or do they want you to complete something, like actually end up with a product they can use? Or do they just want you to do some research that they can then use? Getting clear on what is expected is very, very important, and the sooner you can do that early in the process, the better. So you want to plan for these, all these different things before you go in. You want to spend some time mapping the stakeholders and planning for access. And you may want to even prepare a little slideshow. I had a project manager I worked with who was excellent at this. They would prepare a slideshow which they'd work through in the meeting. And as they got to different points in the meeting, different slideshow, they'd actually start to type. It's like a contract. They type in the slideshow, who's responsible for what, the timeline, the deadlines, the dates, as they were discussing with the client. Now, this is a very smooth way of doing contracting, and I thought it was excellent and something that I've adopted. So you want to prepare that slideshow, and once you've done it enough, you might have a common slideshow that you then put in different details for the client's organization information, There might be different information about the different project, but you can have a template that you can then use for other clients. So we're feeling pretty good. We've done our preparation, we've researched the university, we understand the many university international students they have, we have a clear understanding, not completely clear because we still need to do research, we need to do our primary research, but we have a clearer idea of the problem space. And so you meet with the client, whether this is online or in person. So bring the slide deck that you've prepared, have that small talk you have at the beginning, which is so important, building that rapport. Ask thoughtful questions about their goals, those things that we spoke about earlier. Understanding deliverables. You want to also communicate what's the timeline and be very clear on how much time you'll need. You want to be very clear with them about when you'll be getting feedback from them, whether it's twice through the process or once through the process. If it is a co-design process, that's going to actually take a lot more time, and you'll need a budget for that. So time is money. And you want to manage expectations. So you've got to be really clear about how much feedback you will be getting from the client. If you keep it open, you might be getting, they might be expecting outcomes all the time, or to see different things at every stage. I recommend that you do the research and you define your research, and that could be one point where you share your findings and you share with them what you're thinking of doing next. And then you could do another round where you share your key ideas and you get their feedback on what they want you to proceed with, and then you deliver the project. And there might be a possibility for feedback then again. All depends on their budget and how much they can afford. So yes, you're in the meeting, you're going through your questions, you're trying to unearth any assumptions that there might be, you're getting very clear on their expectations, you're also communicating your working style and how you'll work. You may also introduce that you're doing the design thinking process and explain that there will be an outcome at the end, and that it's an iterative and flexible process. Just check their comfortability with that, because they might not have come across design thinking before. And you want to talk to them about the stakeholders that you've mapped and find out who you can access. Can you interview any senior leaders if you need to, and can they organize those times? Can they arrange for you to interview international students? Will there need to be ethics? Because especially in this space, if it's health, that's a sensitive issue. So you probably will require ethics. As it's not towards a publication, you probably won't need to go through a traditional ethics procedure, but you still need ethics and consider ethics. And you could discuss with your client how that will look and what will be needed. Okay, so you've gone through that meeting. You've discussed things about how you're going to work, your working styles, challenges that might come up and how you'll mitigate them, the deliverables, the purpose of the project. And you've got all this information, and so you're going to put that into what's called a reverse brief, where you take that information, you prepare your timeline, you prepare the deliverable, like a description of deliverables they're expecting, and you put this into a document or a presentation even that you could then present back to them. And you then have another meeting, or you share this document and get their approval. It's called a reverse brief. So you take their brief, and based on their feedback, and you get even clearer and more specific on what you're going to do. That superstar project manager I previously worked with would even in the meeting pull out their ClickUp timeline. And I thought that was excellent. They had this Gantt chart which shows when different parts of the project will be done and what timing it will happen and when it will be finished. And they just go through this with the client. And in a way, it made me recognize that this whole client engagement piece is also the product. Doing that well builds confidence with the client. And then they feel, okay, you're in control. You can definitely do this. I was just very impressed with that process. And it just makes me think that the more professional you can be in this engagement with the client, the better. Because really, yes, the deliverable is the product, but your engagement with the client is also the product that you're selling. And if they feel like they had a fun and good and professional experience with you, they'll, one, want to work with you again, and two, they'll recommend you to others. So it's really important that you get this right. You've gone through this process. You've worked out with your team how you will work together and how you might mitigate and manage challenges. You've prepared for your client meeting. You've had your client meeting. You've created your reverse brief and you've got approval. And so now it's up to you. You have a timeline of when you need to get this project done. And you can use the design thinking process to guide this process. And so the next episodes will talk about each of the 4 stages of the design thinking process and give you some ideas of what sort of things you could do through that stage. I want to make it really clear because we've spoken about the timeline, but the design thinking process is very flexible and you will come into challenges and ambiguity. And even though you've had a chance to chat with the team and set expectations, problems will occur and there'll be frustrations. So when working through a process like this, it's really about how do you manage working in this ambiguous space? How do you work together? And yes, so this is exciting. So next episode, we'll explore the discover phase of design thinking, which is where you're getting into your research. All right, I hope this has been helpful. Please comment in the Substack. What do you do in these setup meetings and before you set up the project? What experience do you have talking with a client, and what did you do? What things did you struggle with? What were some of the hiccups that you might have made, or what's been a strategy that's worked really well for you? I'd love to hear all these things. Just please comment in the Substack, which I'll put in the show notes. Great. Happy design thinking. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's show. Make sure you subscribe to keep track of all the episodes. And I look forward to having you here again. Have a great day.